He didn't hunt in his own city. He didn't have a type. He didn't even kill on a schedule. For over a decade, a quiet Alaska contractor flew to random American cities on his days off, rented a car under someone else's name, and drove for hours to bury a container in the woods. Inside it, a gun, a knife, zip ties, cash, sometimes a body bag. Then he'd fly home, go back to work, wait months, sometimes years, before he ever touched it again. When he finally got caught, it wasn't because police found a pattern. There was no pattern. He built his kills so no two of them could ever be connected. No shared victim type, no shared location, no shared method. The FBI believes he killed at least 11 people. To this day, they can only name 3. This is the story of Israel Keyes, and the case that terrified the FBI more than almost any serial killer in modern history, because of the one thing he refused to give them: the truth. On February 1st, 2012, 18-year-old Samantha Koenig was working an evening shift alone at the Common Grounds coffee stand on Tudor Road in Anchorage, Alaska. Surveillance footage would later show a man in a hooded jacket and sunglasses approaching the window. Minutes later, Samantha was gone, abducted at gunpoint and taken to a truck parked across the street. For weeks, her disappearance played out like any other missing person case. Her reward climbed to $70,000. Search parties combed the area. Then, her family received something no one expected: a ransom text sent from her own phone, along with a photo, Samantha, alive, holding a newspaper to prove the date. It was staged. Samantha Koenig had already been murdered inside her abductor's home within hours of being taken. The photo, the texts, the illusion that she might still be alive, all of it was constructed by the man who killed her to buy himself time. That man was Israel Keyes, a 34-year-old handyman and contractor who ran his own local business, Keyes Construction. He was, by every outward measure, unremarkable. He had a young daughter he clearly cared for. Neighbors and clients described him as reliable, quiet, hard-working. Nothing about him matched the profile of the person investigators were looking for. Keyes was finally caught in Texas, nearly 3,000 miles from Alaska, after agents tracked a withdrawal made on Samantha's stolen debit card to an ATM in Humble, Texas. 3 days later, he was arrested in Lufkin. What happened next is what makes this case so different from almost any other serial killer investigation on record. Israel Keyes talked, not out of guilt and not out of any wish for redemption. Investigators who interviewed him described a man who seemed almost proud of what he'd built, a killer who wanted credit for his method, even as he refused to give up the details that mattered most. He told them there were others, many others. He said he had been killing since at least 2001, and that his victims were strangers, men and women, different ages, different states, selected essentially at random. He said he avoided children and avoided targeting parents, but beyond that, there was no pattern for police to search for because he had deliberately built none. Then he described his method, and it's the reason this case unsettled career FBI agents. Keyes would fly on his own money to a city he had no personal connection to, sometimes picked almost arbitrarily off a map. He would rent a car using a fake name, drive out to a remote forested area, and bury a cache of supplies: a firearm, a knife, restraints, sometimes cash, sometimes a shovel. He called these his kill kits. Then he'd fly home, resume his ordinary life as a contractor and a father, and wait months, sometimes years, before returning to the same buried kit to commit a murder in a place investigators would never think to connect to a man living quietly in Anchorage, Alaska. The FBI later mapped his movements and found he had taken as many as 35 trips across the country between 2004 and his arrest in 2012, crossing state lines with no obvious reason tied to work or family. Any one of those trips could have ended in a murder. Investigators still don't know how many did. During interrogations, Keyes described the compulsion in his own words. Asked about the moment he crossed the line the first time, he told investigators, "Once I started, there was nothing else like it." He confessed by name to killing Bill and Lorraine Currier, a married couple in Essex, Vermont, taken from their home in June 2011, a case that, before his confession, had no suspect and no leads. He confessed to Samantha Koenig, and he told investigators the FBI's own count, 11 murders in total, was accurate, dating back to at least 2001, though he claimed it might have started even earlier, in the late 1990s. But he wouldn't give them more than that. Keyes seemed to treat the investigation itself as a kind of game, offering just enough truth to prove he wasn't lying about the scope of what he'd done, while withholding the one thing that would let families bury their dead. Names, dates, locations. Agents who worked the case have said he appeared to take satisfaction in controlling exactly how much pain he caused, even from inside a jail cell, even facing certain life imprisonment. On December 2nd, 2012, before he ever stood trial, before he was forced to answer for a single other death, Israel Keyes killed himself in his cell at the Anchorage jail. He left behind a note. Investigators who reviewed it said it was largely incoherent, full of rambling and grievance, and contained no new information about his victims. What he did leave behind were the drawings, found under his bed in that same cell, 11 small skulls drawn in his own blood. 11, matching the number of murders he claimed, silently confirming what words never fully would. In the years since, the FBI has released an interactive timeline of Keyes' known travel dating back to 1997, hoping the public might recognize a city, a date, a missing loved one who never came home. They've connected him to a small number of additional victims, including Deborah Feldman, last seen in April 2009 in Hackensack, New Jersey, but 7 of the 11 lives Keyes claimed remain, to this day, complete unknowns. No names, no confirmed locations, no closure for whatever families are still out there wondering. Investigators have said plainly that Keyes' death made the case harder, not easier. The only man who knew where the rest of his kits and his victims were buried took that knowledge with him on purpose. What makes Israel Keyes different from almost every other serial killer isn't the number of victims, and it isn't even the brutality. It's the architecture of the crimes themselves. Years of planning collapsed into single, isolated moments of violence, spread across a country, built specifically so that no detective, no database, no algorithm could ever connect the dots. He wasn't caught because agents were clever enough to see his pattern. He was caught because, for the first time, he made a mistake close to home. Somewhere in America, there may still be a buried kit no one has ever found. And somewhere, there may still be a family who has spent over a decade wondering what happened to someone who simply never came home, never knowing the answer was written in blood under a dead man's bed in an Alaska jail cell.